All right, friends, the hour is upon us. 9 o'clock, and we got stuff to talk about. Happy Valentine's Day +1. Happy Transfiguration Sunday. Anybody know the real story of St. Valentine?
Yes.
What is it?
Wait, no, that's sorry, St. Patrick.
Yeah, St. Valentine, I was just reading about this yesterday, and I need to double check my work, right? Because you can't always trust what you read. But from what I read yesterday, St. Valentine was executed by the Roman Empire for performing marriages between people. And there was an exception in Roman law at that time to keep you out of imperial service in the army if you got married. And so St. Valentine was busy marrying people to help them avoid service, draft dodging. And they killed him for it. Love in resistance to the empire. Indeed. Not bad, right? Not bad. Yes. And then Transfiguration Sunday. And it's Pancake Day. So I hope you're hungry. We'll be having pancakes after service because, more of us will be here on a Sunday than if we came here on Shrove Tuesday. This is part 3 on the art of dying well. Week 1, we talked about just kind of the theology of and emotions of facing our own death. Last week we talked about caring for other people when they are suffering and or dying. And then today I really want to spend the vast majority of our time just planning for our own deaths in very practical ways. And so some of you have done that already, and you may have really good insight and wisdom to share with us about the things that you've already prepared for, things to keep in mind. In my experience as a pastor for however many years now, the number of people who actually had something in writing for their funeral preparations, I'd say at most it's 1 out of 10. At most. It's usually probably closer to 1 out of 20. So you're not prepared, which is fine. And as you see, we're able to make things work, whether we have things written down or not. But it is nice when people are able to help shape their own service. It's both nice for the service itself, but it's also really a gift of love to your loved ones left behind, who are sitting there going, what was Dad's favorite scripture? I don't know. And you're not thinking clearly in that moment, right? Now you're able to think a little bit clearer because it's not imminent. But in those moments where you've got to start making decisions one after another, and many of you have been through this know, it's just this barrage of decisions to be made, and kind of the last thing to think about was, what hymns did Mom like? That's a hard thing. So now you can give your loved ones a gift by doing some of that work for them. So, in the spirit of Mr. Rogers, that anything human is mentionable, anything mentionable is manageable, I do want to spend, this is a 6.5-minute video, but it's worth it, of Father Greg Boyle talking about death and about what he calls the risen Christ reality. I think there is, whenever I find someone who's able to face death and do so both with the gravity that it demands, the seriousness that it demands, but also able to maintain a deep sense of joy, those are the people I want to hang out with. And so last week we heard from Phyllis Tickle. This week we'll hear from Father Greg Boyle, who works with gang members in Los Angeles. And I think by this point is buried 200, I forget what the number is these days, well over 200 people who died to gang violence in LA.
What breaks your heart apart, and what breaks it open?
There's a difference. I don't know. I mean, I like the line about to allow your hearts to be broken down into the very things that break the heart of God. So yesterday I buried my 193rd young person killed because of gang violence. I knew him for 15 years. He was a sweetheart. was able to see, I think, and know that he was exactly what God had in mind when God made him. Knowing that is more powerful than death. Because I think on some level he became that truth. He inhabited that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. And that's important to me. So it breaks my heart because he was a wonderful kid, and I knew him since he was little. He was about, 27, I think. His name was Jose, 75. And a troubled kid, and just like the profile of any kid who regrettably finds himself in a gang. But I think it's important to chronicle the list of things that are more powerful than death. And to kind of...
Let's do this last week. No, stop that.
27, I think. His name was Jose, 75. And a troubled kid, and just like the profile of any kid who regrettably finds himself in a gang. But I think it's important to chronicle the list of things that are more powerful than death. And to kind of meditate on those fates that are worse than death. Not knowing that you were exactly what God had in mind when God made you. You don't want to get through life not knowing that. And so that's important at my place at Homeboy Industries because death is a kind of a constant. And unless you know what those two lists look like, then death will come and you'll be toppled. And you don't want to be toppled.
How do you bury so many people and still sing, oh God, not that you sing that, not that you sound like that, but that you would praise God and still rejoice and enjoy good food and good drink and kinship with all those deaths? I mean, or is that just because you're in this book and now you're this fancy guy that like talks and you're selling this book and going around and you're on TV and stuff like that? I mean, do you really think that God's making things new? Or do you really think that life comes from death? Or is it, I mean, how can you still believe that after burying? How many people have you buried?
193. Yeah, I mean, you know, part of the risen Christ reality is to know that death has no power. And yeah, you know, I like the Dalai Lama who reflects on his own personal death. As a reporter had asked him, and he just shrugged and he said, "Change of clothing." Well, you know, I want what he's having, you know, because I think that's exactly right. And that's how you become free. And you put first things recognizably first. And you live as though the truth were true. That's how you, in your own prayer journey, you get to a place where, this is, you know, I'm an old English teacher, so death is a comma, not a period. And that's, you know, part of faith, but it's also part of understanding that death is like the seasons. It's like the fifth season. And the more you can get to that place. But if you think death is the worst thing that can happen to you, brace yourself. You're going to be toppled. And so, you know, this kid Jose did not live forever. But he lived in the forever. And he did that in his own struggle and kindness and joy and goofiness. And he suffered a lot. He carried more than I've ever had to carry in my life. So I stand in awe at him and I honor who he was. But, you know, the trick, not like it's a coping device. But the trick is to live in the forever. And you do that by staying absolutely anchored in the present moment with the person sitting in front of you. Christ in me, recognizing the Christ in you. That's every day, that's every second. So you can lament what happened yesterday, or you can fret about what will happen tomorrow. But this is the only moment that we have, you know. And if you can delight in that moment, you know, and stay anchored in the duty to delight, then it works. Then kinship happens. Then you're listening. Then you're receiving somebody. Then you're connecting to somebody.
When I grow up, I want to be just like Father Greg Boyle. A list of things that are fates that are worse than death, and a list of things that are more powerful than death. That's a worthwhile task, I think. As we've talked about, I think over the last couple of weeks, part of the reason this is difficult for us is because many of us have not been exposed much to death. Was with someone, again, very, very recently, who's in their, I think, 50s. And it was with someone who has still not been with someone as they died. Not been in the room with someone as they died, which, again, is a pretty common experience for people in 2026. That doesn't make this person, I'd say that's the norm, not the exception. But it does put us in a very strange place historically. Historically, that would be the absolute exception, right? You would always have been exposed to death from a very young age throughout human history. So it's no wonder that we're just so uncomfortable with it. We don't know anything about it. We're not exposed to it. And so when it comes, it can topple us, right? And part of the way we are able to not be toppled is to both speak about it, face it, and make preparations for it. Even though I shared this the first week, I thought, let's share it again. Such a series of great questions by Henry Allen. Is death such an absolute end of all our thoughts and actions that we simply cannot face it? Or is it possible to befriend our dying gradually and live open to it, trusting that we have nothing to fear? Is it possible to prepare for our death with the same attentiveness that our parents had in preparing for our birth? What a lovely idea. And can we wait for death as a friend who wants to welcome us home? I was with Bob Winchester this week, and Bob's in hospice care. I haven't heard if he's died yet or not, and I assume he has not because I haven't heard. Man, being in the room with someone who's 93 years old, 69 years of marriage, multiple generations of loved ones, and being in that room, you're already in heaven. There's grief, yeah, there's grief, but the amount of love that's just being expressed in the room is amazing, right? And I wish it upon anyone to die in such a manner, where you've got the people who you've given the most of your life to there to be with you and usher you through. What could be better than that? So death does not have to be this big scary thing. It can be something that we prepare for and welcome. So I've listed off here just a whole bunch of things to consider, and there's many, many more. Jeannie, you shared some really good resources with me, and they're much longer, but also really good. But this at least gives us something to start with, right? Which is to be prepared spiritually, medically, ethically, legally, and then for the service itself. And so, in terms of spiritual preparation, writing out a spiritual testimony or letter to your loved ones. My will, as it exists, has a little essay that I wrote about facing my death, particularly as it relates to healthcare decisions for my loved ones. Because even as I've shared my thoughts on that, I know that when you're in the moment, you cannot necessarily think straight or remember. And not only that, there can be pressures that come from the outside, from the medical establishment, from family and friends who think they know better than you do. And your letter to them can serve as a reminder, right? And so when I first wrote this will, it was right after Asher was born, so I'm 30 years old. And I just wanted my loved ones to know I'm not afraid of death. It's okay. You don't need to go to extraordinary measures. No, I know they're not good. And that's a strange thing to say as a 30-year-old, but it's true, right? Already then, like, yes, obviously, I'd like to live if I can, but I don't want to be on a ventilator unnecessarily. Certainly don't want to be kept alive in a medically induced coma just in case. No, it's fine. I'd rather die. I'd rather you to be able to move on with your lives than that, because it's all right. I'm not afraid of death. And so writing some type of letter to your loved ones. Mine's in my will. I know there's others of you who've actually written individualized letters to some of your loved ones so that when you die, they can find them. I thought, what a lovely thing. And what a lovely thing to do, not just about your feelings around death, but your feelings around these loved ones. Because not every relationship this side of the grave is necessarily going to be fully reconciled. That's just the way it is. I know that. That's true, I think, in probably all of our lives. There's relationships that just aren't going to be exactly how you would like them to be. Not every ending is going to be this, we're all surrounding each other and isn't everybody reconciled and loving. It's not always going to be that way, and that's actually okay, but you can prepare for that by writing out, whether it's your regrets, your love for these people, your desire for them to forgive you, your willingness and already hopefully work done to forgive them. All of that can be great gifts that you leave behind for those who will be left behind. Seeking reconciliation where needed, right? Making amends, forgiving and ask forgiveness. People often in death work, hospice care, say that the things that people need to say to each other around the deathbed is pretty much universal, right? It's I'm sorry, I forgive you, do you forgive me, I love you, thank you. What am I missing? Goodbye.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to go.
Yeah. There is all really basic stuff, right? And so for all of our differences, right? All of our sure opinions on this or that makes me a unique person. In the end, we all go to the same place, and we all have kind of the same things that need to be said. So you can do some of that work now as well, by seeking reconciliation where you need to, making amends, forgiving, asking for forgiveness. Our new Book of Common Worship, which isn't that new anymore, but it's still less than 10 years old, so it'll be around for probably 30, 40 years, probably 30 years. The funeral service, we've not done this by any stretch. In fact, we don't do it most of the time for our funerals, but I wonder if we should, which is having a prayer of confession and forgiveness within the funeral service itself. We've certainly done some here. And what I like about it's the way that they framed it. I should print it off for you. It just talks about, while we talk, but it talks about the reality that things are said in our lifetime that have left wounds, even in the best of relationships. And so being able to name that in the context of worship, I think, has some incredible power. Let me pull it up here. Come on. Here we go. Yeah, here's the prayer of forgiveness for funeral service. God of mercy, whose loving kindness endures forever, we confess that we have often failed to receive and give love, to care for others as we care for ourselves, to forgive and accept forgiveness. Love this part. We remember good intentions that were not put into actions, harsh words that were hurtful, selfish purposes that caused pain, persistent pride that would not yield. We acknowledge our fear in the face of death and our failure to accept the hope you offer us in Christ. Gracious God, forgive us and help us to forgive others. Heal us from the pain of self-condemnation. Free us from the burden of failures that cannot be corrected. Renew us with your loving assurance that our sins have been forgiven. That's good stuff. And that can heal people at your funeral service. Or it doesn't just have, there are times where the funeral service becomes such a, Bob was the greatest father ever. It's great, you know what I mean? Bob's a darn good father, right? Darn good husband. But it doesn't need to be this elegy to everything was always great 100% of the time, because it wasn't. And that's okay. That it doesn't make it anything other than acknowledging the broken world that we live in by including some of these things. And so that's something to think about as well, is including a prayer of confession at the service itself. Talk with your family about end-of-life wishes. You haven't done that. You should do that. What do you want? Some of this is going to be out of your control for a variety of reasons, right? Financial, practical, whatever, but do you want to die at home? A lot of people say they do. It's a lovely desire, but also know that your loved ones then may have the memory of you dying in that home. So it can also be a sharing of what you want while asking for dialogue about what your loved ones want, right? And sharing that together. And as we often know, the amount of care you can receive in your home isn't necessarily as robust as you can get at a Kobacher house or some of these other places that we have. But yeah, sharing with your loved ones, having those conversations, beginning to make it normal. Especially if you got kids who that just scares them. I don't want to talk about it. Well, okay, I understand that. That's a very normal reaction for kids with their parents. You're too young for this one. You don't know. No one's too young. No one's too young to have this conversation. And so beginning to normalize being able to talk about these difficult things with your loved ones. And then, of course, as we'll have here, identifying meaningful scriptures, hymns, prayers to be included at your funeral. Can I ask, how many of you have a advance directive / living will? Okay. Do people know where it is? Do your loved ones know where it is? It's only helpful if they do, right? Not helpful if they don't. I don't have it anymore, but I used to have even those little cards in my wallet. I think some of you do have so that if you're picked up by the squad, it in theory informs those people that you have opinions that have been stated and where to access them. Who has a healthcare power of attorney? Good. Look at all of you. It's good. And of course, there are lawyers you can pay who will, charge you what lawyers charge, which isn't cheap. Last time I checked, there are these online legal services like LegalZoom.com that can help you write out a will, living will, as well as power healthcare, durable power of attorney, and it's way cheaper, right? From what I understand of these things, as long as it's truly written out, that's what really matters and acceptable. It's not that it has to be a lawyer's signature on it that makes it somehow. That's the one that has power. The other ones don't.
I was going to say, you don't need a lawyer at all. You just need a notary and write it down and witnesses, and that's all you need.
Some of them don't even require notaries. It can just say, that we'll have a line for witnesses, signatures, but as long as you've got it out and got your name on it, got it signed, it has power typically. Jackie?
Well, I want to concur because I just did a will, and the bank said we don't notarize wills. They said you try UPS says we don't notarize wills. I called down to the probate reported, no, in our state of Ohio, you need witnesses, but notarization is not necessary, and that was my experience last summer.
I maybe won't do it. I found that too, because we did, as I thank you for because I forgot we'd done that, brought it to the bank and said, we don't do this. But you can have a friend, and the friend needs to serve as witness, and that's good enough. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. Clarify your wishes regarding life support, feeding tubes, DNR orders. hospice care.
Now, one of the things that is, and I don't know if it's in Ohio, but there is a document that said if you want DNR, do not resuscitate, it's A&D, allow natural death. Which says you're not doing something, it's do not resuscitate is
Yeah.
kind of negative, but allow a natural death is another way to label that document.
Yeah, that's nice.
Actually, the state of Ohio, there's no DNR in the legislature. It's A and D.
It is A&D.
It's A and D, and it's been true since, nobody believes it, but it's been true since somewhere in the late sixties.
Usually that,
And you should actually, shouldn't be, the best thing is be A and D. Allow that to death and not DNR.
and
Yeah.
Everybody uses DNR.
And it doesn't have the power that we think it does, yeah.
usually that also happens at the hospital.
Uh-huh.
So if you get picked up by an ambulance, they are going to try and resuscitate.
Sure, yep,
Until you get to the
That's
hospital
right.
and they can verify everything. You can hand it to a paramedic.
yeah, paramedics are just gonna do work, they're not gonna go through your wallets, and if they do, they're not gonna stop and go, wait a minute, we need to go check this, because what if it says, use every means necessary to keep me alive, and you've been spending the last 20 minutes trying to find out what the person had, so they're gonna,
Unless you're like assisted living or
Yeah.
something like that, then it's practice, but I know from experience, it's not on the street.
yeah.
But they don't have a choice. They
Yeah,
don't have a choice.
yeah,
What were you saying, Bob?
they don't have
They don't have a choice.
Like, can't do
Their
that.
job is
Yeah.
to get you to a facility.
So don't call the squad.
Yes, yes. If you really want to allow a natural death, don't call the squad. Yeah.
it's very true. Even at the nursing home.
You know, hospice
Not a
nurse
nurse.
told us that years ago when my brother was passing, don't call the squad. You know, we could call the hospice nurse if we wanted to, but just call the nurse, call the funeral home. You know,
In a hospital or assisted care, you're fine. But if you're at your own home and the minute you call 911, there's life saving, it's gonna happen. It's just the way it is, unfortunately.
But I
And
think if you die at home, you have to also call the police and they come to ensure that somebody didn't kill you on purpose.
Yeah, sure, of
I
course.
don't think that's true.
You don't need to call the police, you can just call the funeral home.
Somebody's gonna.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in hospice.
Yeah,
yeah, if you're involved in hospice and all the papers are there, they'll come and pronounce you.
it gets complicated, and some of you know this too, it gets complicated when you or your loved ones are in healthcare facilities too. Because you can have your wishes expressed, written, all of that, but then the facilities have their policies and procedures that are put in place, yes, in theory, to care for their patients, but also to do what? Protect themselves. And we run into this a lot with my mother, where, if she falls and has a slight cut on her head, the policy is gonna be send her in. Doesn't matter, we don't think anymore, we do it because this is the policy, because we're protecting ourselves. But having sat in the ER with her in those situations, it is so traumatizing to her to be out of memory care in these places where, even, let's say the worst happened, she's fallen and had a brain bleed, which I think is about the worst that can happen. Do you think that we're gonna send her into brain surgery to stop the bleed in her Alzheimer's-ridden brain so she can? No. So like, even if the worst happens, we're gonna allow a natural death in this situation, but the facilities are doing what they're doing. And so it can be a battle, right? It can be a battle even with people who are very well-meaning and otherwise taking really good care of your loved ones. It's not just because you've written it down, just because you've communicated it. If you're under the care of someone else, then you're under the care of someone else, and they're gonna do what they're gonna
That's
do.
why it's so important to have somebody that you trust as power of attorney.
Yes.
Because, if the family says, oh, no, you need to keep her alive or him, facilities really in a bad position.
It's a challenge too, and again, not to make this about, it's not about my story, it's just recognizing being practice of this stuff is good, because when the squad's there saying, we need to do this, we need to do this, it takes a lot of will to say, no. No. You're wrong, I know what's best for my loved one here. And I'm defying you, and it sometimes takes that kind of love, no, hey, too much personal experience, it's bad. But we learned by going through it. Legal financial organization. Financial, we talked a little bit already about legal stuff. Yes, your will. Beneficiaries. How about this? Consider making a covenant one of your beneficiaries. Why do is I selfish in saying that? Of course I am. But I'm selfish for all of you. I'm selfish for this institution. I want this church to continue. I want it to be around in 50 years. The number of churches in our country that'll be around 50 years from now is minimal. And so it's going to take estate giving planning for that to take place. And we are right now in the midst of the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. It's happening right now. As this generation dies and passes their estate on, there's more money that's changing hands over the next 20 years than has ever happened in the history of the world. And for the most part, everybody's in on that except churches. Universities are, obviously families are. and some of these estates, are so big, which is great, good for you and your big estate. Wonderful. How much do your kids really need? How much is good for them? These are all questions that are at least worth asking. I'm not telling you, what to do or what's right, but at least those are good questions worth asking. And are there organizations, institutions that are worth your support as well as your loved ones? And the best way to do that, as I understand it, if you actually do want to make an estate gift to anything, is to include that as a beneficiary in your will. Isn't that right? Yeah.
The other thing we've just been talking about is we did our wills like 20 years ago or something like that. 10, longer. But we basically designated our 2 children.
Yeah.
But over this time, our grandsons are now becoming adults and graduating from college. So we're thinking we need to revisit that and update it and treat them as adults.
Sure.
And not just give it to our 2 children.
Yeah.
To decide how to divvy it up.
That's right. That's good. It's good. These things change as our life situation changes. Our first will, of course, was we're really young. Asher was born. We have no money. Basically, our estate is quite small. 100% is going to Asher's trust. Yeah, because there's not, there's not much for this kid if we're gone. So we need to make sure but we're getting to a point now in our late 40s where all of a sudden the estate looks a little different now than it did 17 years ago when he was born. Dave?
You don't even have to put it in your will if you have an IRA. What you have to do is designate what percentage of your IRA goes to what beneficiary.
That's right. There are other ways to do it. It doesn't have to be in your
You
will.
don't even have to have it in your will.
Yeah, that's good. And one thing that we've just started to talk about, we do have there's a program that is up and running right now that has not been shared with you yet about estate giving and covenant, because we're just way behind, right? We should have been doing this 20 years ago. Well, whatever, we're doing it now. And one of the things I've just floated is, we talk about tithing as a principle. It's not like a hard and fast rule. I don't think that the New Testament demands you tithe to your local church, but it's a biblical principle of giving that I think has some merit, that I see things worth considering. Why? Because it's painful. It hurts. It hurts to give my tithe back to this church. And that's part of the point, is that it's not just the leftovers. It's not just the part that you don't notice, that your giving actually hurts. Consider tithing your estate as well. It's at least worth considering. There are people I know who they make a big thing about if you have kids, make your charitable giving one of your kids, so the beneficiary, and then make it equal, right? So in this case, there'd be 50% of our estate would go to charitable giving. I'm not doing that. That's beyond, but that is stuff people do. right? And I bring that up to say that there are many ways to give. It does not have to be percentage-wise, but it's worth at least considering. Organize important documents in one location. Yes, your will, your insurance policy, your account information, your password access plan. Big story on NPR this week, all about that, of people die and nobody knows how to get into their Facebook accounts. Nobody knows how to get into their retirement accounts, into their Netflix accounts, right? All of these things that they're gonna keep charging forever and ever, amen, for small fees like Netflix, for big fees like whatever, and having all of that in one place. But that gets tricky too, because you can that can be a wonderful recipe for identity theft. And so making sure you've got all those passwords in a smart place that makes sense, but maybe it's in a safe, or maybe it's in one of these password programs, like Apple, for instance, right, has all of my passwords saved. And then Apple also, in my iPhone, in my Apple account, has a death element to it now, so that when I die, my Apple account, ID account, goes to Sarah, so she has access to everything, which would then include all of my passwords. So a helpful thing, if any of you have iPhones, it's there. It's there for you. So that's one way to help make it easy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, pretty cool, huh?
Joel, the other thing about that, and I've worked in doing that, is those darn passwords change, and accounts change so quickly
Yes.
that the challenge of keeping that up to date
Yes.
is,
It's a challenge. So for me, at my point, I don't memorize any passwords, right? All of my passwords are strong encrypted passwords that's in my password app in my iPhone. So yes, if you have my iPhone, you've got everything, right? And you get into it, and you can get into my passwords. But it's just not worth it to me to try to remember any more fuzzy bunny 74 or whatever, like there's just too many, right? And so that's how I've chosen to do it. There's different ways. And of course, the reality is there's no perfectly safe way. All of them have liabilities. That's how I choose to do it.
Then if you have the name of your financial advisor, and that's what you need in with your will, because we have POD on everything.
Yeah.
Right? Pay on death. And as soon as you notify them that that I died, they cut the checks right then, it's all gone.
Nice.
So you don't have to worry about probate.
Yes.
No money in there at all. And now that we sold our house, there's 2 cars.
It's great. Yeah, another great gift to your loved ones. If you that's one of the big burdens you leave behind by not having wills, by not having these things all worked out, is that then your estate goes through probate, so your loved ones wait for a year or two before anything comes to them. Okay, and maybe they're all in a great place for it, but if nothing else, it's a big pain. It's a big pain.
That's why you use trusts
Yes.
or your assets.
Chris.
I was just gonna say that Mom always told us to get to those passwords before they know you're dead. Because,
especially banks.
yeah, because everything gets probate, everything gets locked down at a certain point.
Yeah.
And
So,
also, if you have something in the bank, you get your exeter, your child as a co-name. What they do, they just need to go to the bank the next day after you die, pull everything out. And
That's right. Jeannie, you
Well, this is just a practical thing. I talked with someone that works with taxes, and she said it's a good idea to have a lot of things, hard copies as well as the digital.
Yep.
So I've had
Put it in your safe.
But I keep it in a briefcase that's mismarked. You wouldn't know that anything important is in there. It's kind of beat up. So I was, years ago, I was told, put it in a place that's the closest to the front door. If your house is on fire, you're not gonna run down to the basement to get that. That is true. So just a practical thing.
It's smart.
Put it in a sealed plastic bag in the freezer.
Don't put them in a fireproof safe and leave it in the fire, because you'll open it up and it'll be a pile of ashes.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's disappointing. That's what I've been banking on, Kathy. My little tiny $50 fireproof safe from 26 years ago isn't doing the job anymore.
We had a massive fire.
Oh.
This guy had this huge
Well,
safe.
because when you open
And
the
it was
safe,
a fireproof safe, well, it heated,
Yeah.
nothing burned
Sure.
per se, it didn't catch on fire, but it did everything.
Good tip. Okay,
it also
see?
has oxygen in it.
Yeah.
Our collective wisdom is better than our individual wisdom.
And be careful to know you can't burn inside because it's got oxygen in it if it's that hot and that. We had a safe, which we did not take with us, and it had on the door, at 120 degrees, it would, spurt water all through the safe. That's why everything had to be in Ziploc
Interesting.
plastic bags.
Be careful about safety deposit boxes too, because if you're not on there, you're gonna need a death certificate to get into that, like, which you're not gonna get for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
A while.
$7 is smart. Gene.
I'm not obsessed about this, but because I have everything and have had for years altogether. If I had a tornado warning and I'm heading out the basement, I grab that bag.
Yeah.
Because everything could just be, maybe I can't get into the bank and it's,
Yeah.
you know, some sort of setup or,
It's good. One thing that I wanted to mention here too, just, there's a lot, we're not gonna go over all of it, but under practical preparations, declutter.
Oh,
Yeah, a gift to your, yeah, right? Tori, come on. What a gift that would have been. And you know, if we wait, then you'll never do it. Because you'll get past the capacity to do it. And then we just leave behind so much stuff for our children, for our loved ones that they can't do anything with. And declutter. And
It
give
took
them
my
the
mom a
gift.
year
So, yeah.
after my dad died to do this.
So rest of our time, what I'd love you to do is to take a few minutes and start filling this thing out. And guess what? I'm gonna do the same thing. Because for all of my talk, I've never actually written down what I want from a funeral. So I'm gonna do it right now, and I invite you to do the same. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, my husband and I went to a funeral last Saturday in Dayton with, for a friend's father. And the whole time I'm sitting there listening to the homily, because it was an Episcopal church, I'm making notes in the program of no, yes, no, yes. Because it was front of mind, right, when I was sitting there.
Good.
So, I've done that, I've saved like the
Yes,
program, then I
so
like it, and so there's a couple of them saved, yeah.
Another thing about giving to the church, somebody sent this once, I was like, and it just stuck with me. I'm sitting here right now, on this chair, on this floor of this church, because 50 years ago, somebody else gave money. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know, but they need somebody to be here, and they wanted, for whoever those future people are, to enjoy the spiritual family. And so that helps me to give. 50 years from now, I want somebody to be sitting here. I don't know who it is, but that's what I'm doing. Yeah, my other little piece of advice that state planning attorney told my mom, the hardest thing to transfer, if you don't plan for it, is your car, your motor vehicles, blah, 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 blah. So save yourself a ton of time, attorney time, family time, and go down and pay $16.50 to title it, to have a payable on death beneficiary. Do it now, put your car title, you own it, but it's payable on death to Tori when I die, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And otherwise, it's so many steps with the BMV that are really, really hard to do.
Good. Yeah, I never thought of that. Good tip. Hey. Yeah. Or whoever is someone.
Something that I noticed when my dad died is we don't teach our children how to mourn our parents.
Yep.
And you are lost. Walking through life lost after you lose a parent.
Yeah. And having these discussions with your kids helps prepare them to grieve. And that is a gift to your kids. Because, Don.
Well, this last week my sister died, so my family was, I guess you should say my sister's family did not know what to do with the funeral. That's one thing. And they depended on me to help them make decisions. If you've never been to a funeral home and had to pick out a casket, or in many cases that's not true anymore, but you still have to make decisions. Funeral homes are business.
Yep.
Right.
Never forget that. That's right there. And when you,
It's a lot of money in death.
well, there's not my sister's funeral expenses, this is in Missouri, where it's not as expensive as it's here, was $16,000.
Easy.
It's really standard.
That was $16,000. And that was a moderate funeral. It wasn't the least expensive, and it certainly wasn't the most. But when it came time to pick the casket, they were just, they just stood there frozen.
Yeah.
And it took just a couple statements to say, Nelson had this view, Levy had this view, and of course the funeral director ready to go. And not disrespectfully, but the other thing that I noticed that one of the things that funerals do, and this last week was part of that, it brings chaos. And you've got to, and not necessarily in a bad way, but everybody grieves individually. And so you have to be able to adjust to everybody's pain, because it's not the same for each of us is different. And so, but and then when it came time to the funeral, happened, 4 of us in clergy, my niece just said, it's yours. And we made all the decisions. But it's a time to grieve and it's a time to celebrate. And that's a part that's difficult, because you're doing both at the same time.
For sure.
Somebody said, what do you say? And somebody told me, just say you will miss them.
Yeah.
So that's a memory I have.
Yeah.
If the kids ask, what should I say? You can buy a car for something.
That's good. It's simple but true.
Yeah.
People don't know what to say.
Well, it's never, whether it was.
Yeah. Gene.
Years ago, we did a whole month series at church with every Sunday during Lent. We visited a funeral home. We had the whole youth involvement and talking about it and visiting an embalming space. And we really went, and we got a lot of pushback. There were some unhappy people about it, but it does make a difference to see and touch.
Just familiarity. There's a natural human fear about the unknown, and that's what the last 3 weeks have been about. Can we start familiarizing ourselves with this universal human experience so that it's not so big, bad, and scary when it comes to us or to our loved ones? Everything dies. And as you know, on just a very strict biological level, your body cells are dying every moment of every day. We are surrounded and sustained by death from our first breath to our last. It's not a binary of, oh, I'm alive and now I'm dead. We're always surrounded by death. Our lives are only sustained by taking energy of other dead things into our bodies so we can live. And so yes, it's this ongoing process that we can familiarize ourselves with so it's not so scary. Jane.
This is kind of tangential, but I have to say it because it makes me happy. Well, you know, things that I and it's just, I had a dream. We had a lot of promoted jobs. So we had the ashes of the most recent ones. And it just occurred to me, then when I saw this, you know, they were making plans, I said, you know, I have this dream. You wanted the Oscars, the ashes of the jazz. That was the first time I saw him smile. Absolutely, but you don't say you're doing it.
Yeah.
But, and I didn't know a number of people who've done that.
That's so great. What you did there was make it mentionable. Anything human is mentionable, anything mentionable is manageable. When we put language to these things, all of a sudden they're not so powerful.
Yeah, and Daisy's going with me.
Okay.
We'll be there, 4 of us together.
Love that. So take this form with you, fill it out now, and if you can leave it, you obviously can leave it at your home, you can leave it with us, you can make a copy of it, one at each. But I'd love to have some more plans in place for all of us, myself included. One thing I didn't include on here, which I should have, is of course we have this memorial garden out here that is gonna need to be expanded, not to, whoever designed that could have used a little more dirt, a little less paper bricks, but that's all right. We'll find a way to expand it because we'll need to, but you can include that as well. So I want to be in Covenant's Memorial Garden. That's certainly and also a much more cost-effective way if you are looking to save money. You don't need to embalm. You can just cremate and go right here and save yourself a lot if you want to. So thank you all for your willingness to engage on this. Hopefully this is not the last time we talk about it. And I wanted us to read this last phrase. This is holy work. Preparing well is an act of love. May you do your holy work and may you love well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.